Hello, brothers, and welcome to Sigma Old Man Channel. The truth doesn't always set you free. Sometimes it makes everyone around you hate the hell out of you. And that's exactly the life of a Sigma male. Psychologists have found that people often resent those who don't conform to social hierarchies. It's called status incongruence. Translation? If you're not playing the game, people don't just ignore you, they start despising you. And Sigma males? They don't just refuse to play, they flip the whole board over and walk away. Here's the kicker. Society pretends it loves independence, but in reality it rewards obedience and groupthink. So when a Sigma male lives by his own rules, he accidentally becomes a walking reminder of what everyone else wishes they had the guts to do, and nothing breeds hate faster than envy served cold. It's funny when you think about it. The Sigma isn't out there trying to cause drama. He's not plotting, scheming, or recruiting an army of followers. Nope. He's just minding his own business. And somehow that business ends up offending just about everyone. It's like he has a superpower for irritating fragile egos without even opening his mouth. So today we're diving deep into the 12 brutally honest reasons why people hate Sigma males. And trust me, these aren't your recycled surface-level clichés. These are the raw, uncomfortable truths that explain why the Sigma lifestyle doesn't just attract admiration, it sparks resentment, fear, and sometimes even hostility. Number 1, they reveal that most people aren't free, they're owned. Most people like to tell themselves they're free. Free to make choices, free to live life on their own terms, free to chase whatever they want. But scratch beneath the surface and you see the chains everywhere. People are owned by their jobs, by social approval, by their need for validation, by the fear of rejection, by the expectations of family and peers. They don't really move because they want to. They move because they're pulled. And the hardest part is they've normalized it so much that they don't even notice. A Sigma male disrupts that illusion without even trying. His life quietly exposes how trapped most people really are. He isn't owned by the corporate ladder, because he doesn't climb ladders built on someone else's terms. He isn't owned by peer pressure because he doesn't beg to belong. He isn't owned by trends, titles, or applause because those things don't feed him. His freedom is subtle, but it's unmistakable. And that subtlety makes it worse because it holds up a mirror people would rather smash than look into. When a Sigma male walks away from something everyone else worships, like a high-status job, a perfect relationship, or a glittery social circle, it doesn't look like rebellion, it looks effortless, and that effortless defiance gnaws at people. They start questioning their own lives, their own choices, their own compromises. It's one thing to see someone trapped with you, it's another thing to see someone escape without breaking a sweat. That's when envy, resentment, and eventually hate start to boil. Here's the brutal truth. Most people don't hate Sigma males because of who they are. They hate them because of what they reveal. They reveal that freedom is possible, but it comes at the cost of giving up the comfort of belonging. They reveal that most people aren't strong enough to walk away, even when they desperately want to. They reveal that the normal way of living is less about living and more about surviving under invisible ownership. That revelation doesn't sit well. People don't want to admit they're owned, so they turn their frustration outward. They label the Sigma cold, arrogant, selfish, detached. Anything to mask the uncomfortable truth that he simply refuses to be enslaved by the things they've surrendered to. And in the end, that's why he's hated. Not because he breaks the rules, but because he exposes how many people were never free to begin with. Number 2, they don't translate their value for others' comfort. Most people spend their lives translating who they are into something digestible for others. They explain themselves, justify their choices, water down their achievements, or inflate their personalities just enough to be noticed and accepted. It's like a constant sales pitch. Here's why I matter, here's why you should like me, here's why I'm worthy of being in the room. Society rewards this because it makes interactions easier. It keeps egos comfortable, and it ensures that nobody feels too small in comparison. Sigma males don't do that. They don't shrink their edges to fit into someone else's frame, and they don't package their worth in neat little boxes for public approval. Their value isn't up for negotiation or explanation, it simply exists. If you see it, good. If you don't, they won't lose sleep over it. That refusal to perform or market themselves is unsettling for people who are used to others bending over backwards to prove their importance. To them, it looks arrogant, dismissive, even disrespectful. But it's not arrogance, it's self-possession. There's a quiet confidence in not needing to broadcast your value. And that confidence exposes just how desperate most people are for recognition. When someone doesn't explain themselves, it forces others to sit with their own insecurities. They start to wonder, why doesn't he need my approval? Why doesn't he care what I think? The lack of translation becomes a threat because it strips away the usual social rituals that protect fragile egos. The irony is, Sigma males often add massive value, whether it's through their work, their insight, or their presence. But they don't dress it up with explanations or performances. That makes it easy for others to misjudge them. People confuse their silence with emptiness, their detachment with superiority, and their independence with a lack of contribution. What they can't grasp is that true value doesn't beg to be understood. It stands firm even if no one recognizes it. And that's the real reason people hate this trait in Sigma males. It forces them to confront the possibility that all their effort to prove themselves might be wasted energy. It suggests that value isn't something you sell, but something you embody, and that truth is hard to swallow when your whole identity is built on convincing others you matter. Number 3, they expose the fragility of charisma-addicted people. Some people can't breathe without an audience. They measure their worth in likes, claps, laughs, nods of approval, the constant drip feed of validation that keeps their ego from collapsing. They've built their identity on charisma, charm, and the ability to hold a room. Without that spotlight, they feel invisible, and invisibility feels like death. Then a Sigma male walks in. He doesn't compete for attention, doesn't rehearse punchlines, doesn't adjust his personality to be more likable. In fact, he thrives in silence, in solitude, in spaces where nobody's watching. That's not just unusual, it's threatening, because when someone flourishes without applause, it exposes how dependent everyone else really is on it. Suddenly, the person who thought they were powerful for being adored realizes their power only exists as long as the audience keeps clapping. This is why Sigma males make charisma-addicted people uncomfortable. They highlight a painful truth. If your self-worth is built on external attention, then it isn't self-worth at all, it's rented confidence. And unlike most people, Sigma males don't pay rent. They own their sense of value outright. And that quiet ownership makes the performers of the world feel cheap in comparison. What cuts even deeper is that Sigma males don't set out to expose anyone. They don't call it out. They don't humiliate anyone publicly. They just exist. And that existence alone is enough to shine a harsh light on the fragility of others. Nothing bruises the ego more than realizing someone else doesn't need what you're addicted to. It's like watching someone breathe freely while you're still gasping through a mask. To those addicted to charisma, this indifference feels like disrespect. They can't comprehend how someone can walk away from applause like it's nothing. And because they can't match that level of self-sufficiency, their envy morphs into hostility. The Sigma male becomes a threat not by stealing the spotlight, but by showing it was never needed in the first place. At the core, this is why people hate Sigma males. They don't need the world's attention to validate them. And that fact alone dismantles the illusion that attention equals power. It reveals how fragile and hollow charisma can be when it isn't backed by true self-possession. Number 4, they're not exhausted by loneliness, others are. For most people, loneliness is like quicksand. The longer they sit in it, the more it pulls them under. Silence becomes unbearable, empty rooms feel heavy, and the absence of constant interaction starts to eat at them. They crave noise, company, chatter, and the reassurance that someone, anyone, is around to distract them from the weight of being alone. For them, solitude feels like punishment. But for a Sigma male, solitude isn't punishment, it's oxygen. Extended time alone doesn't drain him, it feeds him. The stillness isn't emptiness, it's space to breathe, reset, and sharpen himself without interference. Where others suffocate in silence, he grows stronger in it. That's the part that unsettles people. What weakens them strengthens him. What they run from, he embraces. This difference makes people uncomfortable because it forces them to face a brutal truth. They're not afraid of loneliness, they're afraid of themselves. Left alone too long, their insecurities creep out, their regrets echo louder, and the persona they wear in public starts to crumble. They need people around them to drown out their own thoughts. The Sigma male doesn't. He can sit with himself for hours, days, weeks, without flinching. And that quiet resilience makes others realize just how fragile their relationship with themselves really is. To those who fear loneliness, a Sigma male's independence feels almost alien. They see someone who doesn't beg for company, who doesn't crumble in silence, who doesn't text 10 people just to fill the void. Instead, he thrives on his own rhythm, recharges in his solitude, and walks back into the world stronger than before. That kind of self-containment can feel like an insult to people who rely on constant social validation to keep their identity alive. So instead of admitting their dependency, they project it as judgment. They'll call him antisocial, cold, detached, or even broken. But the truth is, it's not his solitude that bothers them, it's the mirror it holds up. His ease with being alone reminds them of their unease. His peace in silence exposes their desperation for noise, and that's why they hate it. The Sigma male doesn't just survive loneliness, he thrives in it. And every moment he does, he proves that most people aren't running from loneliness at all, they're running from themselves. Number 5, they refuse to bleed for collective approval. In most groups, loyalty is measured by sacrifice. The more you give up, your time, your energy, your peace of mind, the more loyal you're seen as. People overwork themselves for bosses who don't value them, bend over backwards for friends who wouldn't do the same in return, or stay in draining relationships just to prove they care. It's an unspoken rule. If you're not bleeding for the tribe, then you're not truly loyal. Sigma males reject that rule outright. They don't equate exhaustion with devotion, and they won't bankrupt themselves emotionally just to earn a gold star from the crowd. To them, self-sacrifice for the sake of approval isn't noble, it's extortion. It's the group saying, show us how much you love us by destroying yourself. And the Sigma's answer is always no. This refusal unsettles people because it exposes how much of their loyalty isn't loyalty at all. It's fear of rejection dressed up as virtue. They're terrified of being seen as selfish, so they overextend themselves until they're running on fumes. When a Sigma doesn't play along, it makes their sacrifices look less like honor and more like desperation, and that comparison burns. The hate comes from misinterpretation too. People see a Sigma walking away from toxic group demands and assume he's cold or self-absorbed. What they miss is that he's simply protecting his boundaries. He's not refusing to give, he's refusing to be drained dry. He's not against loyalty, he just won't hand it over as currency to buy approval. That distinction is subtle but powerful. And here's the irony, the Sigma's refusal to bleed for the tribe often makes him the most trustworthy person in the room. Why? Because his actions aren't driven by fear, guilt, or pressure. If he helps you, it's because he chose to, not because he was cornered into proving himself. His loyalty, when given, is genuine. But because it doesn't come packaged in sacrifice and suffering, most people miss its value entirely. At the end of the day, this is why people resent Sigma males. They won't play the martyr to earn love, they won't perform pain for applause, and they won't cut themselves open just to keep the tribe comfortable. And while others drain themselves to feel accepted, the Sigma quietly proves that the highest form of loyalty isn't self-destruction, it's authenticity. Number 6, they kill ego battles by not competing. For most men, competition isn't just a pastime, it's the unspoken language of bonding. Who's stronger, who earns more, who's wittier, who has the better car, the sharper suit, the bigger house. Even friendships are often built on this constant measuring game, a subtle clash of egos where the scoreboard never really turns off. It's not always toxic, but it's always there. Sigma males opt out of that game completely. They don't bite when someone tries to flex. They don't puff their chest when challenged. They don't scramble to prove they're better, richer, or smarter. They stay unmoved, almost indifferent, as if the whole thing is background noise. And that indifference does more damage to other men's egos than any victory could. Why? Because competition only works when both sides agree to play. When a Sigma refuses to engage, the man trying to prove himself suddenly looks like he's shadowboxing. All his effort to dominate falls flat because there's no opponent to defeat. His flexing doesn't intimidate. It looks desperate. And nothing bruises the ego more than realizing the person you're trying to outshine doesn't even see you as competition. This is where the resentment kicks in. Men who rely on competition to feel relevant find Sigmas infuriating. They can't dominate him, can't provoke him, can't even drag him into the arena. The Sigma's refusal to engage leaves them feeling invisible and irrelevant, as if their entire identity, built on being better than the next guy, suddenly collapses. To them, his calm detachment isn't strength, it's humiliation. The irony is, Sigma males aren't avoiding competition out of fear. They're avoiding it because they genuinely don't care. Their self-worth doesn't hinge on winning against anyone. They measure themselves only against their own standards, and that makes them immune to the ego traps most men fall into. In a world where dominance is currency, the Sigma has already cashed out. And that's exactly why he gets under people's skin. He dismantles the entire foundation of ego battles simply by refusing to play. He wins, not by outshining others, but by showing he doesn't need the spotlight at all. And nothing enrages the competitive spirit more than realizing the fight was meaningless before it even started. Number 7, they threaten control freaks. Control freaks thrive on predictability. They need to know how you'll react, when you'll fold, and what buttons to press to keep you in line. Their sense of power comes from the certainty that with the right mix of pressure, guilt, or reward, they can bend people to their will. It's not always obvious. Sometimes it's dressed up as leadership, love, or just trying to help. But underneath, it's all about control. Sigma males are the nightmare these people can't handle. They don't respond the way they're supposed to. A manipulative boss expects them to chase approval. They don't. A partner tries guilt-tripping them into submission. They detach. A friend demands blind loyalty. They quietly walk away. Every attempt to pull their strings falls flat because there are no strings to pull. Their detachment makes them unpredictable, and unpredictability makes them impossible to own. This unpredictability drives control freaks insane. They can handle resistance. They know how to fight resistance. What they can't handle is neutrality. When their tactics don't land, they're forced to confront the fact that their power is only real if others give it to them. A Sigma male refuses to hand it over, and that refusal feels like humiliation. What makes it worse is that the Sigma doesn't fight for control either. He doesn't storm in trying to dominate or prove he's the alpha. He simply exists outside the system, untouchable, unbothered. That independence strips the control freak of their leverage, leaving them frustrated, exposed, and furious. They can't win a battle against someone who isn't even playing. To outsiders, this often gets twisted. The Sigma gets labeled as stubborn, rebellious, or impossible to work with. But the truth is much simpler. He just won't be emotionally extorted. He refuses to live on a leash, no matter how fancy or well-disguised that leash may be, and that's the heart of the hatred. Control freaks don't just dislike Sigma males, they feel threatened by them. Because every interaction with a Sigma reveals the truth. Their control was never real power. It was dependency. And nothing terrifies a controller more than meeting someone who refuses to be controlled. Number 8, they embarrass people who rely on loudness to be heard. Some people can't function without being loud. They raise their voice in every room, exaggerate every story, dominate every conversation, and mistake volume for influence. Their entire sense of relevance comes from how much space they can take up, how many eyes they can force onto themselves. For them, silence feels like erasure. If they're not being heard, they don't exist. Enter the Sigma male, who does the exact opposite. He doesn't shout, doesn't compete for attention, doesn't bulldoze his way into conversations. He can sit quietly in a corner, say a few words when it matters, and somehow still command more presence than the loudest person in the room. That's not just irritating for the noise dependent, it's humiliating. Because what the Sigma exposes is simple. Loudness doesn't equal importance. People who rely on noise to matter suddenly see how fragile their influence really is when someone else can eclipse them without even trying. The Sigma's quiet confidence shines a light on just how much of their authority is nothing more than theatrics. And theatrics only work as long as no one notices the act. This dynamic cuts deeper than ego. It destabilizes identity. For the loud, being noticed is survival. When a Sigma male quietly outshines them with stillness, it feels like their entire personality is collapsing. They're faced with the uncomfortable truth that maybe people were never truly listening. They were just tolerating the noise. The resentment builds because the Sigma doesn't fight for the spotlight. He doesn't steal attention. He simply exists authentically. And people are naturally drawn to that. It's effortless presence versus forced relevance, and the contrast is devastating for those who depend on volume to feel valid. That's why loud personalities often hate Sigma males more than anyone else. The Sigma makes them feel exposed, hollow, and overcompensating. He shows, without saying a word, that real presence doesn't need to announce itself. It's felt, and nothing embarrasses a person more than realizing all their shouting was never power at all. It was just noise. Number 9, they refuse to carry fragile egos. Most people walk around carrying fragile egos, whether they admit it or not. They need constant reassurance that they're smart enough, attractive enough, successful enough. Compliments, validations, and little ego boosts act like emotional band-aids that keep them functioning. Without them, insecurity creeps in and starts to eat away at their confidence. Sigma males don't play that game. They don't hand out comfort compliments just to keep someone's self-esteem afloat. And they don't tiptoe around insecurities to avoid bruising feelings. If someone is fishing for validation, they'll often get silence instead of flattery. If someone needs constant stroking of their ego, they won't get it. Not because the Sigma is cruel, but because he refuses to participate in the cycle of dependency that keeps people weak. This refusal is often mistaken for coldness. People label Sigma males as insensitive or detached because they don't feed fragile egos on demand. But in truth, it's a form of honesty most people aren't used to. By not coddling others, the Sigma forces them to confront their own insecurities instead of outsourcing their self-worth. That honesty can sting, but it's far more valuable than false reassurance. What makes this especially uncomfortable is that most social interactions are built on ego management. Friends, co-workers, even family members are constantly propping each other up with little white lies and exaggerated affirmations. It's the social glue that keeps relationships smooth. When a Sigma male opts out of that script, it creates tension. People feel exposed, like their insecurities are suddenly obvious and unprotected. And this is where resentment kicks in. Instead of appreciating the raw honesty, most people interpret it as rejection. They feel unseen, unloved, or dismissed, when in reality the Sigma is simply refusing to enable a fragile identity. His silence or bluntness doesn't mean he doesn't value people, it means he won't trade authenticity for comfort. That's why Sigma males get under people's skin. They don't babysit insecurities, they don't inflate egos, and they don't perform emotional labor just to keep others comfortable. And while that makes them appear cold, it also makes them unshakably real. The truth is, people don't hate them for being unkind. They hate them for refusing to lie. Number 10, they expose the addiction to belonging. For most people, belonging isn't just comforting, it's survival. They join cliques, tribes, and circles not just for friendship, but for identity. Their sense of self is stitched together by the groups they're part of. The workplace team, the social crowd, the family expectations, the brotherhoods or sisterhoods they pledge loyalty to. Without that attachment, they feel lost, like they don't exist outside the approval of others. Sigma males break this entire system just by being themselves. They don't beg to belong, they don't scramble for acceptance, and they don't treat validation as oxygen. They walk alone if they have to, and they're not weakened by it. In fact, they often thrive. And that's what terrifies people. Because if one man can stand strong without leaning on a tribe, then the excuse, "we need each other to be whole," starts to look like a cover for dependency. This is where resentment creeps in. The Sigma becomes living proof that dependence isn't strength, it's fear dressed up as unity. He doesn't mock the tribe, he doesn't even attack it. But his independence exposes how fragile the foundation of group identity really is. If you remove the applause, the labels, the constant reinforcement, many people wouldn't even know who they are. The Sigma does, and that self-possession unsettles everyone who doesn't. The hatred often comes disguised as judgment. People will call the Sigma antisocial, arrogant, or too independent for his own good. They'll frame his detachment as weakness because it doesn't fit their definition of strength by numbers. But deep down, what bothers them isn't that he doesn't belong, it's that he doesn't need to. And here's the brutal truth. Most people can't sit with themselves without panicking. They need the tribe to echo back their worth, to remind them they're significant. When they see a Sigma male existing without that constant reassurance, it forces them to question whether their belonging is really love. or just dependence. That's not a comfortable thought. So they turn their discomfort into resentment. They hate the Sigma not because he's against belonging, but because he reveals the cost of their own addiction to it. His independence is a mirror they don't want to look into, and the reflection is clear. Maybe they don't belong out of strength. Maybe they belong out of fear. Number 11, they don't exchange integrity for acceptance. Most people bend the truth just to keep the peace. They soften their words, swallow their opinions, and pretend to agree when they don't, because being liked feels safer than being honest. Entire social groups are built on this silent pact of polite lies. Smile at the joke you didn't find funny, nod at the opinion you secretly disagree with, and clap for the performance you thought was average. It's not truth that keeps the group together, it's compromise. Sigma males refuse to play along. They won't exchange integrity for acceptance, no matter how uncomfortable it makes the room. If they believe something, they'll stand by it. If they don't, they won't fake agreement just to fit in. Their raw honesty slices through the thin fabric of fake harmony most people cling to, and that makes them instantly unlikable to those who depend on politeness as a survival tool. What makes this sting is that the Sigma doesn't deliver his honesty with theatrics. He's not out to embarrass or humiliate anyone, he just refuses to betray himself for the sake of approval. That refusal makes others uneasy because it reveals how often they betray themselves in exchange for acceptance. His presence becomes a mirror, showing them that their so-called kindness or cooperation is often just fear of standing alone. This is why Sigma males are polarizing. People who value truth find them refreshing. But people who rely on social niceties to maintain power or comfort see them as dangerous. They'll call him rude, blunt, antisocial. Anything to paint his integrity as a flaw instead of facing their own lack of it. Because it's easier to hate someone for being unapologetically real than to admit you've been living a watered-down version of yourself. At the core, this trait is what isolates Sigmas the most. They're not trying to be rebels, they're just unwilling to sell out their principles for applause. And in a world that rewards conformity, that makes them stand out. The cost of their honesty is often acceptance, but to them the cost of dishonesty is far greater, and that's why people resent them. A Sigma male doesn't just refuse to play along with fake harmony, he exposes how fragile and fake it really is. He shows that truth and belonging rarely sit in the same room, and most people would rather hate him than face that reality. Number 12, they're too unapologetically self-sufficient. Most of society is glued together by dependency. People lean on each other for emotional validation, for a sense of identity, for financial help, for social standing. It's not always unhealthy, but it's constant. The unspoken agreement is that everyone needs someone, and needing others is what makes you human. So when a man shows up who doesn't play by that script, it doesn't inspire admiration, it makes people uncomfortable. Sigma males are unapologetically self-sufficient. They don't cling, they don't beg, and they don't orbit around others to feel complete. Their independence isn't just practical, it's emotional, mental, and social. They can stand alone without panicking, and that stability throws everyone else off balance. Because if one person can live without leaning so heavily on the crowd, then maybe dependency isn't as natural as people want to believe. This creates resentment because it exposes fragility. Most people realize deep down that their so-called strength is really shared weakness, propped up by others who are just as needy. When they see a Sigma male thriving without constant reassurance, it highlights the cracks in their foundation. It forces them to question whether their connections are built on genuine bonds or on fear of being alone. That's not an easy question to face, so instead of looking inward, they turn their discomfort outward and resent the man who made them feel it. The irony is that Sigma males aren't against connection. They'll collaborate, love deeply, and form bonds like anyone else. But the difference is they don't need those bonds to survive. That's what separates them. Their relationships are choices, not lifelines. And because they don't lean on others out of desperation, their independence can look like arrogance to those who can't imagine standing on their own. In reality, it's not arrogance at all, it's security. It's the ability to be whole without outsourcing pieces of yourself to others. But in a world that thrives on dependency, that kind of wholeness is often misread as selfishness, coldness, or even danger. And that's why people resent Sigma males for being self-sufficient. They don't just live differently, they prove that most people aren't as strong as they think they are. At the end of the day, people don't really hate Sigma males because of what they do. They hate them because of what they reveal. Every move they make, whether it's thriving in solitude, refusing to be manipulated, or standing firm in their integrity, exposes the cracks in everyone else's facade. They highlight how much of society runs on dependency, ego games, polite lies, and invisible chains. And when someone refuses to bow to those systems, it forces others to see just how much they already have. The Sigma male doesn't walk around trying to be hated, feared, or envied. He simply lives by his own rules, and that authenticity is enough to unsettle an entire room. His silence embarrasses the loud. His detachment frustrates the controlling, his honesty offends the fragile, and his independence terrifies the dependent. Not because he's attacking them, but because he's proof that another way of living is possible, a freer way. That's the raw truth. Sigma males don't create enemies, they reveal them. They don't seek out battles, yet their very existence challenges the illusions people desperately cling to. And when the mirror gets too clear, most people would rather smash it than face what it shows. So whether they're hated or admired, feared or misunderstood, one thing remains constant. The Sigma male walks his path untouched. Because unlike the world around him, his worth was never up for negotiation. If this breakdown gave you a new perspective on why Sigma males spark so much hate, don't just keep it to yourself. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear where you stand on this. And if you want more brutally honest insights like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and share it with someone who needs to hear the truth without the sugarcoating. Your support keeps this channel growing, and trust me, we're only just getting started.